everybody, welcome to another Crack-A-Pack special on the Mana Leak. I've got another pack here, and we're going not too far back in time. We're just going back to Theros. Theros, if you weren't around for it, was the block just before Khans. It was a block based on ancient Greek gods with a little bit of Roman stuff peppered in here or there. It had some good cards. Some of the prices of cards are still in fluctuation because they're still in Standard. Not entirely sure what cards are going to kind of stick around once they rotate out. Thoughtseize, obviously, but beyond that, it'll remain to be seen, really. Perhaps Stormbreath Dragon. But let's crack this pack open and see what we would pick. Pack one, pick one. Well, first up, we've got ourselves an Omen Speaker. Omen Speaker is a 1 and a blue, 1/3, and when it enters the battlefield, you get to scry 2. So you get to look at the top 2 cards of your library and decide where you want to put each one, either on top or on the bottom. It's a pretty good effect. It's a nice creature in a kind of control-y deck. I used to play this in blue-black quite a bit. I never really first picked it, but I totally liked having it. Next up, we have Grey Merchant of Asphodel. This was a beating in Standard. So Gary, as he was affectionately known as a misreading of Grey, is a 3 black 2/4, but it doesn't really matter what he is. It matters what he does. When Grey Merchant of Asphodel enters the battlefield, each opponent loses X life, where X is your total devotion, your devotion to black. You gain life equal to the life lost this way. Devotion is the number of mana symbols of that color that you have in permanence on the battlefield. So if you have nothing on the battlefield and this guy comes down, your devotion to black is 2. And so your opponents would lose 2 and you would gain 2. This gets really broken late in the game or with multiples because there's so many black mana symbols flying around. He's pretty good. He's pretty darn good. I would consider first picking him. Devotion to black is a bit harder to do in Limited than it is in Constructed. In Constructed it was pretty oppressive for an entire kind of summer, I think it was. But yeah, pretty good. Consider first picking. Hopefully not, though. Next up, we have Divine Verdict. This is some removal. 3 and a white. Destroy target attacking or blocking creature. White often gets this slightly restricted removal. Sometimes it's really restricted and it's only blocking creatures or it's only attacking creatures. But when it's attacking or blocking, it's kind of nice because creatures are generally going to be doing that. The only time you can't use this is, end steps or right after the creature is summoned or things like that. But otherwise, a pretty solid removal spell for white. Next up, we have another removal spell, Sip of Hemlock. 4 black, destroy target creature. Its controller loses 2 life. This was a decent enough removal spell in Theros. Theros was very, very, very removal light. And a 6 mana, 2 color, not 2 color, but 2 black mana symbols casting cost spell was a pretty good removal spell. Again, I wouldn't first pick it, but I liked having them. Next up, we have Boon of Erebos. This is a single black instant. Target creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn. Regenerate. You lose 2 life. This is kind of like Butcher's Glee, although less good because it doesn't get life gain. Butcher's Glee, of course, from Dragons of Tarkir. Instead of life gain, you actually lose the life, but it's ever so slightly cheaper. But the cheaper cost is just not worth it. As I said, there's just not that much removal in Theros, so you're not going to be regenerating in response to removal. You're going to be regenerating purely in response to combat. And combat was a little bit wonky in Theros. Combat was Voltron combat. Typically, you would see people stick 1 creature, throw a bunch of things on that creature, and then be done. And those creatures would have to be pretty large. And so Boon of Erebos just never really got through, and it never really was worth playing. So, first card I think that I'm just flat out not going to pick. Well, here's another one, though. Setessan Griffin. This is a 4 white flyer. It's a 3/2. And you can pay 2 green to give Setessan Griffin +2/+2 until end of turn. And you can only do it once. If you happen to have 8 mana for Orbit Green, you could not do this twice, unfortunately. This was just a kind of expensive flyer. The 2 was pretty weak as well. It didn't tussle with a lot of things, and Just kind of too expensive for what Theros wanted to be doing. Theros wanted to stick an earlier threat and then build it up. The later threats needed to be good, and this one's just not good. Next up, we have Two-Headed Cerberus. This appealed to some players. It's a 1 red for a 1/2 with double strike. And what appealed to players with this was putting stuff on it, bestowing things on it, and Voltroning up this guy because, double strike gets pretty good when it's 3 power, 4 power, 5 power. Unfortunately, it does start out at 1 power, and 1 power double strike is not all that good, especially for the double red casting cost. I never really picked and played this guy. I saw him used to some effect, but never enough that I actually wanted to do it myself, so I think that kind of speaks for that card. Next up is Vulpine Goliath. This is a 4 green 6/5 trample. Nearly as vanilla as you can get. It was an okay card on the top end of green if you needed it, but there were better things to play with. There was Nessie and Asp and things like that. Next up we have a Null. A Null is a single blue for an instant. Counter target artifact or enchantment spell. Now this was the enchantment sort of matters block. They didn't call it an enchantment block, but there were a lot of enchantments around. There weren't a lot of artifacts around. But that didn't make a Null all that useful. I brought it out of the sideboard a couple of times, I think, in the nearly year that I was drafting Theros, because Theros stuck around for the entire draft format. This just was not a card that I ever really wanted to pick, and certainly not first pick. Alright, I think this is our last common. Titan Strength. Titan Strength is a pretty good common. It's a single red. Target creature gets +3/+1, and until end of turn, and you get to scry 1. +3/+1 for 1 red. Totally good. Totally fine. Great combat trick. Fits in red aggressive decks and green red stompy decks and red white aggressive decks, and etc. Adding scry 1 on it for essentially free, because this card could not be any cheaper, is just awesome. Scry is really good. Wouldn't first pick this, but I included it in most red decks that I had. First uncommon we have is Ordeal of Erebos. This was an Ordeal cycle. There was one for each of the monocolored gods, Thassa, Heliod, etc. So enchant creature for 1 and a black. Whenever enchanted creature attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Then, if it has 3 or more +1/+1 counters on it, sacrifice Ordeal of Erebos. When you sacrifice Ordeal of Erebos, target player discards 2 cards. There's a fair bit going on here, and this is worded in a very specific way. It resulted in a lot of rules questions and people not quite realizing what was happening. And it all sort of factored on the fact that those are 2 separate sentences. But anyways, when your creature essentially had 3 or more counters and had attacked, and that was the key part, you sacrificed this Ordeal, so your creature stopped getting counters, but your opponent discarded 2 cards. This is one of the weaker of the Ordeals. The white Ordeal gave you 10 life. The blue Ordeal let you drew 2 cards. Discarding 2 cards, arguably very out of your control. Mind Rot, at least you're going to be casting before you cast it. This, you're going to start to know that your opponent's going to discard cards, but it's still going to take 3 turns of attacks, probably. This was the weaker of the Ordeals, but all the Ordeals were pretty good because of the fact that your creatures just kept getting bigger as they attacked, and that's what you want to be doing with your creatures. I don't think I would first pick Ordeal of Erebos, but there were some that I would definitely first pick. Next up we have Prowlers Home. This is pretty bad. 2 mana for an artifact equipment. Equipped creature can't be blocked except by walls. Equip cost of 2. There were, I believe, 1 wall in the entire block, maybe 2. There just weren't walls kicking around. So this piece of equipment really had no point. You never wanted to play this. I saw some people play it, and I always corrected them and explained to them just how few walls there were in this set. I never quite understood why it was in there. I assumed that Khans of Tarkir was going to have a walls theme because this card was in Theros, and it would kind of mesh with standard. But while Khans of Tarkir block has a lot of defenders, I don't think it really has that many walls explicitly. And of course, these days walls are not, or all defenders are not walls like they were way back when. Next up, we have Eribos' Emissary. This is our first bestow card we've seen, and it's a doozy. 3 and a black for a 3/3. And this 3/3 says you can discard a card, and Eribos' Emissary gets +2/+2 until end of turn. If Eribos' Emissary is an aura, enchanted creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. So, Eribos' Emissary has bestow. So instead of casting it for 3 and a black as a 3/3, you can cast it for 5 and a black as an aura, which attaches onto a creature and gives that creature +3/+3. Plus, you get the ability on this aura to discard a card and make that creature even bigger. And then the cool thing about bestow is that when that creature dies, instead of the aura going to the graveyard, like most auras do, it actually just falls off and becomes the creature. It was a really kind of cool mechanic, caused a lot of rules headaches, and also kind of significantly contributed to the Voltron aspect of the format that ultimately made it a little bit boring, unfortunately. But this was a good one. Giving the creature +3/+3 was great. If the creature died, which wasn't even all that common because there wasn't that much great removal out there, you still ended up with a 3/3. And then the fact that at any point you can just discard any card from your hand and make your creature beefy was really good. There were many games that I closed out with this guy just, having a hand of 4 cards and just attacking and saying, well, +8/+8, plus the +3/+3 it already has, plus its base power and toughness. Just crazy. Yeah, I would first pick this guy for sure. But let's see what the rare is. The rare is Spear of Heliod. This is a 1 white legendary enchantment artifact. So creatures you control get +1/+1, so it's an anthem. Plus, you can pay 1 white and tap it to destroy target creature that dealt damage to you this turn. Pretty good god weapon. +1/+1 to your entire team. Not even just to white creatures, but to your entire team is pretty decent. The fact that if a creature damages you and you have 3 mana up, 2 of it white, you can just kill it. Really changes combat. It really makes your opponent think twice before attacking. Pretty solid. I'd probably consider taking that, I think. And we've got a swamp and no foil. We do have a pig token, though. I collected the pig tokens for a while. So I think we're kind of looking at Eribos' Emissary and Spear of Heliod, the last 2 cards that we saw. So Eribos' Emissary is, as I said, quite good. It can close out games really nicely. That being said, it is an uncommon creature. You may see more of them around. And it's arguably replaceable. Any of the other uncommon bestow creatures would be just as good. So ultimately, I think I'm going to take the rare that I'm not necessarily going to see back around again. And just kind of go white. Go white weenie, possibly. Go red-white aggro. Get my team that much bigger and have this spear just hanging back, kind of intimidating my opponent, making them unable to attack. So yeah, that was Theros. A nice trip back to that. It hasn't been too long since I've played Theros, but I don't have a huge desire to go back. As I said, the format got a little bit boring and a little bit stale because of that Voltron aspect. And unfortunately, Born of the Gods and Journey didn't super expand upon it. It was a good set. I liked all the cards, but ultimately it just got a bit stale. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed these videos. As always, if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, let me know. You can also find me on Twitter at The Mana Leak. That's L-E-E-K, like the vegetable, not the card. And you can also find me on Facebook at facebook.com/The Mana Leak. You've already found me here on YouTube. If you like the videos, you can click the little thumbs up icon. That'll keep my videos rising towards the top. And you should also subscribe to my channel. There's a subscribe button under the videos, and there's one in the outro of each video. That'll keep you up to date on all the latest Crack-A-Pack Tuesdays, Wacky Wednesdays, Spiky Saturdays, Crack-A-Pack specials, any other special videos that pop up, etc. It'll also let me reach more subscribers. So yeah, subscribe, like. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, I will see you all next time.